The first time the billionaire CEO saw her husband kneeling in the middle of a crowded street with blood running down his sleeve, she thought he had been caught in an accident. Then she saw the way he moved. Calm. Precise. Fearless. While everyone else was screaming, he was already directing strangers away from danger, securing the scene, and shielding a frightened child with his own body. And then an old soldier stepped out of the crowd, stared at him for 3 long seconds, and whispered the words that would change their marriage forever. "Commander, you're alive." Before we begin, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to Kindness Legacy if you believe that kindness can heal wounds people cannot see and that everyone deserves the chance to begin again. Sienna Vale had built her life on control. At 34, she was the CEO of one of the fastest-growing technology companies in the country, a woman whose name appeared in business magazines and whose decisions moved millions of dollars before lunch. Her schedule was measured in minutes, her meetings were carefully planned, and even her emotions were something she had learned to keep behind locked doors. But there was one part of her life she never knew how to control, her marriage to a quiet single father named Corbin Reed. Corbin was nothing like the men in Sienna's world. He did not wear expensive suits. He drove an old gray SUV with a dented rear door. He packed lunches for his 8-year-old daughter, Marlo, with the same concentration a surgeon might use in an operating room. He fixed broken toys with glue instead of replacing them, clipped coupons at the grocery store, and sometimes came home with paint on his hands because he helped his neighbors repair fences for free. Sienna had first met him at a community school fundraiser when he was standing in the corner holding Marlo's hand while she tried to convince him to buy one more cupcake. She had been drawn to him because he never tried to impress her. He did not care that she was wealthy. He did not ask about her company. He simply treated her like a person, and after years of people wanting something from her, that small difference felt enormous. Their relationship grew slowly. Corbin told her that he had been raising Marlo alone since his wife died years earlier, but whenever Sienna asked about the years before Marlo, he gently changed the subject. She assumed it was grief. She never imagined it was something much deeper. After their wedding, Sienna discovered that ordinary life with Corbin was strangely comforting. Every morning, sunlight poured through the kitchen windows as he made pancakes while Marlo raced around the table looking for her missing school shoes. Sienna, who once ate breakfast in the back seat of a luxury car while answering emails, began sitting barefoot at the kitchen table, laughing over burnt toast. Corbin never asked her to become less ambitious. He simply reminded her that there was more to life than winning. But Sienna sometimes wondered why he reacted so differently to certain things. A loud car backfiring outside their house would make him instantly alert. A stranger standing too close behind him in a store would make him reposition himself without thinking. He always chose the seat facing the entrance at restaurants. At night, he sometimes woke suddenly, breathing hard, as though running from something in a dream. Whenever she asked, he smiled and told her it was just an old habit. Then came the day everything changed. It was a bright Tuesday afternoon, the kind of warm, golden day when the city seemed unusually peaceful. Sienna had just left a meeting in the downtown district when she spotted Corbin across the street. He was carrying a paper bag filled with groceries and walking toward a small pharmacy with Marlo beside him. Sienna smiled as she watched them. For once, she had finished work early, and she wanted to surprise them by taking them to lunch. She never made it across the street. A delivery truck suddenly lost control at the intersection. The screech of brakes shattered the peaceful afternoon. The truck slammed into a parked vehicle, which spun into the sidewalk. People screamed and scattered. A metal sign crashed to the ground. Glass exploded across the pavement. Sienna froze. Then she saw Corbin move. He dropped the groceries, grabbed Marlo, and pushed her behind a concrete barrier in one fluid motion. He moved toward the wreckage instead of away from it. When he saw a small boy trapped near a broken storefront, he rushed forward without hesitation. A shard of metal had cut deeply into his arm, but he barely looked at the wound. He pulled the child free. Then he turned back. He checked the injured driver, looked for signs of fire, instructed a nearby man to call emergency services, and calmly told another person to keep people away from the leaking fuel. He had no panic in his voice. No hesitation. No confusion. Sienna stared at him as if she had never seen her husband before. This was not the gentle father who fixed bicycles in the garage. This was someone trained to survive chaos. Someone trained to command. Someone trained to save lives. When the sirens finally arrived, an older paramedic stepped from the ambulance and stopped dead when he saw Corbin. The man slowly removed his sunglasses. His face changed. Recognition spread across it like a shadow. Then he whispered, "Commander Reed?" Sienna felt the world tilt beneath her. Corbin's expression hardened. The paramedic took one step closer, then another, staring at him as if he were looking at a ghost. He said that he had served in a medical unit attached to Corbin's old team years ago and had believed him dead after a classified operation overseas. Sienna could not breathe. Corbin said nothing. The man looked at Sienna, then at Marlo, and quietly asked how long Corbin had been living as a civilian. Sienna heard the answer, but it was barely a whisper. 7 years. For 7 years, Corbin had hidden his former identity. That evening, their beautiful home felt unfamiliar. The sunlight that usually filled the living room now seemed too bright. Marlo was upstairs doing homework, unaware that her father's carefully protected secret had begun to collapse. Sienna stood across from Corbin with tears in her eyes, trying to understand how the man who washed dishes beside her could once have commanded soldiers in places she had never heard of. She expected anger to come first. Instead, she felt hurt. Not because he had been a soldier. Because he had never trusted her enough to tell her. Corbin finally opened an old locked box he had kept hidden behind a panel in the closet. Inside were photographs, military medals, folded documents, and a scarred identification card carrying a name Sienna had never heard before. Corbin explained that years ago he had served in an elite military rescue unit responsible for recovering hostages, evacuating civilians, and helping soldiers trapped behind enemy lines. He had lost people he loved. He had carried wounded men for miles. He had survived an operation that went terribly wrong and had spent years believing he should have died with the others. What Sienna had mistaken for quietness was survival. What she had mistaken for emotional distance was pain. Corbin told her that after leaving the military, he wanted one thing more than anything else, a life where nobody knew what he had done, nobody expected him to be a hero, and his daughter could know him simply as Dad. He had met Sienna and fallen in love with her before he ever considered telling her. But fear had kept him silent. Sienna left the room crying. She spent the entire night walking through the house they had built together, touching objects that suddenly carried different meanings. She remembered every time he woke before everyone else. Every time he checked the locks twice. Every time he stood between Marlo and a crowded street. She realized she had never truly understood the man beside her. The next morning, however, Corbin's past came crashing through their front door. 3 black SUVs stopped outside the house. A government official and 2 former military officers arrived. They were not there to arrest Corbin. They were there because people from his past had learned he was alive. A dangerous former operative connected to an old mission had discovered Corbin's new identity. The man wanted revenge, and he believed Corbin had evidence that could destroy the network he had spent years building. Suddenly, Sienna's company, her public reputation, and even Marlo's safety were at risk. For the first time in her life, Sienna found herself completely powerless. Corbin could have disappeared again. Instead, he did the opposite. He stayed. He moved Marlo to a secure location, coordinated with authorities, and quietly accepted the possibility that he might have to face people from a part of his life he had spent years trying to bury. Sienna watched him prepare, and something inside her changed. She finally understood that his greatest secret had never been his military career. It was how much pain he had carried alone so the people he loved would never have to carry it with him. The confrontation came 3 days later in the middle of the afternoon, at an abandoned industrial facility on the edge of the city. Sienna was not supposed to be there, but she had refused to stay behind after discovering that the evidence Corbin needed had been hidden inside a company server connected to one of her business partners. She had spent her whole life believing wealth could solve any problem. That day, she learned courage could look completely different. Inside the building, everything happened quickly. Men moved through the shadows. Alarms echoed. Sienna found herself trapped behind a concrete wall while Corbin moved through the building with terrifying calm. Yet he never became the violent man she feared his past had created. He was disciplined. Focused. Protective. When the final threat appeared, Corbin had every reason to seek revenge. Instead, he chose mercy. He brought the man down without killing him and secured the evidence that would expose the entire operation. When it was finally over, Corbin stood in the fading afternoon sunlight, exhausted, bleeding, and trembling. Sienna ran to him. For the first time since learning his secret, she did not see a commander. She saw her husband. The father who packed tiny lunches. The man who repaired broken toys. The quiet soul who had chosen a peaceful life after surviving hell. She held him tightly, and the tears they had both been holding back finally came. Sienna told him that she could forgive the secrecy, but she never wanted him to carry his pain alone again. Corbin admitted that he had spent years believing his past made him unworthy of an ordinary future. Sienna reminded him that ordinary was never the same as weak. Their marriage did not become perfect overnight. Trust had to be rebuilt. There were difficult conversations, painful memories, and nights when Corbin still woke from old nightmares. But now, when he woke, Sienna was there. She did not ask him to forget. She asked him to heal. Months later, Sienna walked into the kitchen one bright Saturday morning and found Corbin helping Marlo make pancakes. Sunlight filled the room. Marlo was laughing. Corbin was covered in flour. For a moment, he looked exactly like the ordinary dad Sienna had first fallen in love with. And she smiled because now she knew the truth. He was not ordinary. He was extraordinary in the quietest way possible. Not because he had once commanded soldiers. Not because he had survived dangerous missions. But because after seeing the worst things in the world, he had still chosen kindness. He had still chosen family. He had still chosen love. And sometimes, the strongest heroes are the people who never want anyone to know they were heroes at all. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes that love can survive secrets, pain, and second chances, and subscribe to Kindness Legacy so we can keep bringing you stories that remind us there is still goodness in the world. And before the ending, I have a special request. Comment second chances below if you believe someone's past should not define the person they become. That evening, as the sun slowly disappeared beyond the city skyline, Sienna stood beside Corbin on their porch while Marlowe played in the yard. She reached for his hand, and this time there were no secrets between them. Just scars. Just forgiveness. Just family. And a man who had spent years protecting the world finally discovering that the greatest battle of his life was not surviving the past. It was allowing himself to be loved after it.